Recording in progress.
Thank you. All right, well, let's call to order the Design Review Board meeting for June 27th, 2023. Do you want to give us a roll call, John?
Lynn Diedler,
Here.
Marshall Balf,
Here.
and Chair Langberg.
Here.
And we have a quorum of 3 with Christine Lovell and Carrie Bush absent today, and Melissa Hanley.
Okay, great. Moving right along, we have a couple minutes to approve from previous meetings, but as we've discussed, we don't have a quorum of people who are at those meetings here, so we'll table those till the next meeting. Any update from the planning department, John?
Yeah, we have a couple updates. 2 weeks ago, I sat on the SCTA meeting for the kickoff meeting for the active transportation plan, which is the countywide bike and pedestrian plan. So that plan is going to be starting here pretty soon. If anybody on the board is interested, I do have the slide presentation that was presented to the jurisdictions, that if you're interested in those, I can send those to you. And the other updates that we have, Woodmark will be starting back up their grading on that project next week. And the Habitat for Humanity project, which is on Main Street across from Safeway, has pulled their building permit, so they're in review for that. So hopefully that project should be breaking away here pretty soon, and that site will be finally developed. And we are moving along with the tribal consultation notice letters and notice of preparation for the EIR on the Canopy project, which is the 80 units behind the O'Reilly building at the north end of town. So that will, I believe the board saw that in 2019 as a preliminary review.
I think it was even before that.
It could have, yeah, it could have been
Yeah.
before that, 18.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that project?
Yeah, so it's 80 townhome units that will be going in behind the O'Reilly building. There's 2 parcels back there where the old Ceres Garden used to be. It's City Ventures project. So they came in a couple years back and did a preliminary review with, I believe, Planning Commission and Design Review Board. And then during COVID, they had that project on hold and have recently resubmitted for that. So it is going through an EIR, so it'll be a year or so before that's completed, and then they'll move forward with the project plans and such.
How many units?
Roughly 80 units. Yeah. They're 3-story townhomes.
2 and 3-story townhomes. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. And they are subject to our inclusionary. So there's, I believe, 12 units that will be affordable. And then some of the units on the ground floor will have a ADU or ADA option. So you can have, some of them will have a elevator or ADA access stuff. So those would be options to, the potential homeowners. As far as that goes for the planning department, I think that's it.
Can we ask the Christine Lovell question? What's up with the Hotel Sebastopol? Yes, it's amazing how many times people ask me that question.
Yeah.
Especially because of where my office is, but it's just everybody just thinks it's never going to happen, even at this point.
Yeah. So I know that they are working with, I believe Carrie had mentioned in our last planning commission meeting that they have submitted their Caltrans encroachment permit to work on some of the sidewalk improvements there on the corner of Petaluma and Depot Street. Mm-hmm. They're also with the mid-street crossing at Weeks Way, which they're going to be installing. They'll actually be removing that second crosswalk that's at the corner of Depot and Petaluma, where kind of Screaming Mimi's is, because they've identified that as a as a traffic safety issue with the two back-to-back crosswalks. So, and then they are finalizing, I believe, their archaeology stuff to get that underway, because with the weather that we got earlier this year, it kind of delayed that
I see.
process.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the big concern is by the time they get started, they'll be digging in the rain again.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. Well, it's good to hear about Habitat, because that was when we approved that, we were all excited about it, but they even said, like, we don't know when the funding will happen. Like, that's the challenge. And so it sounds like it's moving ahead.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Thank you for that update. Any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? Nope. Any statements of conflicts of interest from the board? Seeing none, we'll go on to our one agenda item for sign permit at 100 South Main. John, you want to give us the report?
yeah. So this is a sign exception for the BMO Bank, which was going to be replacing Bank of the West, located at 100 South Main Street, as required by the sign ordinance. Because this sign package requires an exception for additional wall signage and internally illuminated signage. That's why we're here for approval from the Design Review Board. As far as the description goes for the signage that's being included, there are two internal illuminated company signs that are on the north and east side of the building, two non-illuminated parking identification signs, two window signs on the north and east facing part of the building, and then a illuminated ATM surrounding sign. I do have a couple conditions in there. The proposal also includes some temporary signage. Let me get to that section here. Which is, as required by federal law, banks must have an unveiling for all locations on the same day. As a result, the temporary signage that's included in this package has to be installed by the temporary signage code section of the Sebastopol code. Temporary signage can be up for no more than 30 days. So I have put into the conditions that when that temporary signage goes up, the applicant shall notify the planning department so that they can start the countdown on that. And then when that temporary signage is done, then the applicant shall let the planning department know. The other condition that I have in here is if the board decides that they do not want to allow the internal illumination, that the applicant bring back a non-internal illuminated sign package that staff can approve as part of the exception here. And with that, we did not receive any public comment, but I am happy to answer any questions. And the applicant is also here to answer any questions that the board may have.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board for John? Lynn? Marshall? No question?
Not now.
Okay.
Oh, going this way. Regarding the illuminated signs, I feel that that's a good thing. And the signs, when I first read this, the dimensions given were huge, but I see that it's broken down into little components, and so it looked pretty good to me. And I personally feel that this is just a personal thing. When you're driving around an unfamiliar area looking for an ATM, it'd be helpful if you could find the bank at night. And of course, they don't light them up in the daytime, so it's a minimal problem, so to speak. And And I overall, I like the package that was presented, and the colors, and there's a lot of detail here, very good presentation, and so I had a positive reaction to it.
Okay. And did you have any questions specifically for staff?
No.
Okay. I have a couple questions. So, just to be clear, the exception is because two signs are bigger as an individual sign, but you make a note that overall square footage of the signage is within the allowed overall signage square footage. Is that right?
Correct. So the total square footage, because they're a corner lot, they're allowed both frontage
Yeah.
calculations. So what they're allowed within that calculation, what they've submitted is under that total allowance. What it is for the additional, because there's two wall signs and then there's two additional window signs,
Right.
which our code only allows two of those three. So because they're adding an additional wall sign or window or wall sign, that's the exception there. And then on top of that, the internal illumination.
Well, the exceptions are a greater number of signs.
Correct.
And also two signs that are bigger than can be by code.
Correct.
By
Yes.
ordinance.
By staff level approval.
Yeah.
So they would need the board's
Right.
approval. on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That just wanted to make that clear. And then just a question to you, sort of philosophically in a way. It's in our code, it says that externally illuminated signage is preferred.
Correct.
Right, it's not required. So you as planner or Carrie, do you see an application and say, we really prefer externally illuminated sign, that's what we like here? Or do you just take in the application and we get to talk about it? There's sort of as like the vision of what this town looks
Yeah.
like. That seems like the preferred is language that then you as the planner should say, to the applicant, this is what we'd like to see.
Yeah, that's something that we should, I think, in the future kind of promote at the very beginning, and let the applicant know. And if they decide to go with the internal illumination, then
Right.
let them know that there's, the process of going through the DRB for approval for the internal illumination. But I think, it is preferred, especially, the downtown core area is kind of subject to a little bit more scrutiny as far as the internal illumination stuff
Right.
goes. So that's typically whenever we get a package in, especially in the downtown core, rather than going back and forth, it's sometimes just easier to go straight to the board for
Mhm.
a straight approval or denial or revisions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then we have the applicant here. Is there anything you'd like to present or?
My name is David Ford. I represent the sign company for this project. I just wanted to give a little background. So Bank of the West is now converting over to BMO, so they're rebranding every location. So that's sort of what you're seeing here is the new bank colors and designs that when this was originally designed, they obviously looked at what Bank of the West had. It looks, I haven't seen that sign at night, but it looks like they're designed as, facelit letters. So that was kind of what they had designed here. And that's sort of the standard for BMO. So that's just a little background on why they're making this change to it. BMO is not very well known, obviously, around here. So that they've got the banking center window graphics to kind of help explain that it's you'll see the ATM, but just to kind of explain that it is a bank on there. So.
And it's federal law that when this kind of merger happens, the signage has to all change within 30 days of each other?
So what happens is they have to legally change the name on a certain day. So what they do is the coordination is kind of difficult because, as you can imagine, trying to manufacture signs, get permits, and get them installed at hundreds of locations all at the same time. So the reveal is Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they can't obviously install every single sign on that weekend, or sometimes with even 30 days. So what they do is they have these temporary covers. So what they do is they install the BMO signage, but they still have to have Bank of the West branding on there because it's not officially changed until that date. They can say, joining this family, I think is what it says, or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's got to be done. And unfortunately, with this many locations and the time frame in installation, things like that, and legally it's got to be done that weekend. So that's why they have the temporary signs, is kind of coordinate that. Then it's easy to just take them off on that date.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Oh, one question.
I do have one question. What color is the building going to be painted?
I'm not aware of any color changes. I haven't.
You just look at signs.
I looked. Yes, the signs on here.
What, so you, but
Yeah.
the application is just for signs.
The sign,
and
yeah, the
that's all
application is
you're-
strictly for signage.
that's all you're
We're
doing.
not doing any painting. The renderings that they've got in here shows the building as the same color as it is now. So I'm not aware of any proposed changes to the building color.
Yeah. Actually, in the plan, it says the new paint will be steamed milk, which sounds like white.
Deemed.
I'm
milk.
sorry. Yeah, I think what they're probably referring to is, you're talking about where they're talking about repairing the wall on there.
It's this color, steamed milk.
Yeah. So the steam milk color, what they on the top left, if you look at the drawings on I'm looking at S2, it says remove existing signage, wall repaired as required, seam to seam. They've listed the color on there, so when they take the old sign off, they'll paint and patch. So this is a note on here of what the existing color is, so that the person who's patching and painting it gets the correct color and matches it correctly.
And it's only for the spacer.
Yeah, it should only be that steam color, or that steam milk is really just, should be a reference to the installer, so that they don't pick. You've probably seen signs that have been removed and poorly patched and painted. Somebody just throws up a tan color, and you can see where they put it on there. So they're making, want to make sure that the installer knows exactly what color, and I think they've called it a Sherwin-Williams color on there, so that they can match what the building, where that facade is painted.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Answer your question?
Steamed milk doesn't sound like the color of that building at all.
I don't know. I didn't get that information, so but I have to believe that they got it somewhere, because it's a pretty specific color, whether that came from the, property owner or landlord and they provided it to them, or if they did some kind of, field survey to try and match the colors. But
But it's referring to the spacer, so it's not the building color, I don't think. It's just the standoff between the sign and the building.
yeah,
Right.
on one of the elevations, at least the one I'm looking at, it lists wall color, and it says SW7554 steam milk, and it gives a little circular swatch of it. This is on, looks like page 3.
S3.
Page 3. Yeah. S1 is the sign looking at, but page 3 of the plans.
Oh, wall material. It says wall material stucco. The colors are letter, vinyl, letter,
Yeah.
returns, logo returns, and spacer.
Yeah. This is the page 3 on the
Oh,
bottom.
I see.
Yeah.
Wall color.
Yeah. So it's got wall color, and then at the top left, it talks about, remove existing signage,
Got
wall
it,
repaired as
right.
required, seam to seam. So as I mentioned, oftentimes you'll see that they don't do a very good job matching
Right.
colors in haste. So they've tried to eliminate that issue at these sites by providing the color if they can.
So we're hoping that because there's such a specific spec, that it
Yeah.
actually is the color of the
Yeah,
building.
that the color to match the building. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
not proposing any changes to
Yeah,
the building color.
right. Okay. Any other questions for our applicant? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll take it back to the board. So Marshall, you started talking about what you were thinking or feeling about the project. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No.
Okay. Lynn, anything you'd like to comment on?
Certainly. That generally, I think the signage is modest and appropriate. Actually, I would like to see larger signage on that building. And I think the square footage should consider the fact that it's a corner building with two large surfaces that can be viewed easily from two different directions. And so I'd be willing to accept larger signage. That said, nothing says bank in the signage except that little 4 or 6 inch strip that's down in one window. And to Marshall's point, you know, people need to know, a business should want you to know this is a bank. And it should say that somewhere in great big bold letters, like the building used to say, you know, it's, that it is a bank. And the other buildings around town say bank. So I'd like to see that changed so that, you know, the sign is fine, but get that big word bank up there as well. So as to the internal illumination, you know, we have a number of design guidelines that say we need to follow, encourage, support the historic nature of the Sebastopol downtown. And I think that the kind of sign that is called for here does not do that. And, you know, the internal, plastic internal illuminated signs just aren't historic in nature at all. I think they're kind of mid-modern and don't add anything to the character of the town. And that is a statement there to preserve the character of the town that is valued by many in the community. You know, and people drive through Sebastopol and say, isn't this a nice looking town? I want to live here. So I'm against the internal illumination. Anyway, those are my big comments. Otherwise, I think all the smaller signs are fine and appropriate.
Great, thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I thought it was interesting as well. The logo, they need to add banking center to even say it's a bank because the logo tells us nothing that it's a bank. I don't have a huge problem with that, but I would have to agree with Lynn. I think on the internal illumination, I think this is walking around town right in that area. There are no other signs like this. They're more, excuse me, they're more typical, a little bit at the edge of town or on the strip mall kind of feel. And so here's an opportunity to change that and have something that's more like the city has been asking tenants or building owners to do. So I think the sign is actually plenty big to me. Compared the Bank of the West sign now, I think is nice in how modest it is, but you can see it's a bank, obviously. So I think the size, to your point, Lynn, that it could be bigger. It's already bigger than allowed in terms of each individual sign. I think that's okay. All the other signage, I think I have no problem with at all. But I would advocate to have this come back as a externally illuminated signage solution. That's any other comments, or does someone want to make a motion?
And then Chair Langberg, just as a clarification,
Yeah.
for it coming back as externally illuminated, do you want it coming back to the board, or is that something you feel staff can approve?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would think if we're all in agreement that signage itself looks okay, works, and the size is okay, that we could just have it go to staff approval at that point, so they got a deadline to meet. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of a motion would be, if I were making it, would be to clarify the word bank. needs to be there to address the public as to what this building is for. And I heard you say that.
I agreed with you that I thought it was ironic, but I would not. This is their branding, this is their signage, and if must be a successful bank if it's buying another bank. Like, I don't see that we could make them change their logo or their signage. I don't feel like we'd have that doesn't seem like our place, and we're not being asked to comment on that. But we can comment on it, but my feeling is that's not our purview.
Well, at least they do say banking center, so there's some clue. The building across the street on the corner has one word, one name, and I can sort of figure out what they do, but not really. It'd be nice if they said what they do. But with commercial buildings, I guess we have no say in that. So I feel there's enough identification myself. And because if, we looked at Chase recently, and then you look at Wells Fargo and so forth, and those are more well-known banks. So you see the logo and you're onto it instantly. But this one I've never heard of, and I it would be helpful for it to say that it was a bank until in this area we get used to that BMO being a bank. I don't know. I don't know if this is our place.
Well, I just think it's up to the designer and the owner, right? If you can have restaurants that don't say restaurant,
Well, that's
right?
true.
They just
That's
say
true.
the name of the restaurant.
That's
So why,
true.
so if it's a logo that is interesting, you might just go look. Oh, what's going on? What is that thing over there?
Yeah.
But to say like we have to describe everything to everybody is not at all to me
You're right.
what a designer does in town, or a sign designer does, or an urban designer does. There's other clues.
I feel, I completely understand what you guys are going for. And there's also, remember, on the corner there, the ATM machine is, I believe, staying in that location. So it's pretty apparent that, when you get to the corner of the building there's an ATM. Typically, there's some sort of a bank implied with an ATM there.
Yeah,
So
right on the corner. Yeah. Okay, so we have a proposal for an sign exception. We have to vote on that as well, and then we're sort of ruling on the illumination part. So I don't know can you craft a motion, Lynn, without the bank name part of it, or?
Yeah, I'll choke, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the sign program as submitted with the exception of the illumination of the sign, which is to be external illumination.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? I guess, do we put in the motion that it can then be approved at the staff level?
at a staff level approval, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're fine with that
Yeah.
amendment,
That's fine.
okay.
Okay.
Marshall, you okay with that second
Yeah.
on that? Okay.
Okay.
I would like to put a footnote in, maybe after, but
You can. Go ahead.
I really honor your comment about the signage perhaps being historic, and but we would have to include that, I think, to be fair, in our guidelines. If that's the way we all feel we want to go in this town, someone coming in and making a proposal, they don't know how we feel about the historic aspect, and so they just propose stuff, and it wouldn't be fair to them to shoot them down because they didn't do it. We've got to have guidelines.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think that was the sort of comment Lynn made about when there's guidelines include suggestive comments, right?
Yeah,
Like in
right.
this one, preferred
Yeah.
rather than required, things like that. Just make it vague, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for that, Marshall. And
I believe that it is included in a number of guidelines that say it should conform to the surrounding signage to fit in. And I think it says in the information that we received.
Yeah. It has to fit in the context or, there's,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well,
So it's currently a contextual thing, is what you're saying. Okay.
yeah, it's not like we have historic guidelines that have to be followed.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about the character of the town,
Mm-hmm.
which includes obviously the history or,
Yeah.
so, okay, well, that's discussion we can continue to have at some point, with the whole board or moving forward, but it sounds like we have a motion and a second. So let's go ahead and vote on that.
Yeah, I'll just add real quick with the objective design standards. We also have signage as a part of that package too. So, when we get to that point, we can look at that a little bit more
Yep.
in the future.
That's
So,
right. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I haven't had a chance to read all through this, but it says signs are generally not allowed within the CD Central Core District illuminated signs.
Internally illuminated signs,
Yeah.
that's right. That's the same. Generally not allowed doesn't say prohibited, right? So it's kind of in that same slightly vague language, but yeah. But to John's point, we are working on these objective design standards, which will codify a lot of that. Yeah. Okay. How about we call a vote on this here item?
okay. Lynn Diedler,
Aye.
Marshall Baugh,
Aye.
and Chair Langbert.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes 3 with 3 absents.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And that's our only agenda item for today. So
Could I
Please.
discuss something?
sure.
Okay. I have a lot of trouble with the signage in Sebastopol, and I think just generally there's a lot of poor signage, and new businesses go in where they are undersigned. And I was just stopped by one today that is closing down, but it happens to be a steel chainsaw dealership and lawnmower dealership that's down at the building across from Morris Street there. And, they've got a little 2-foot long sign that says Action Equipment. And they're going out of business. Well, there's lots of business in this town for their products. But that sign just seems so small to me for that business, and there's so much room there. And I think older classic towns, before about 1960, when everybody started squeezing down the signs, they were big and robust, and the historic district in this town used to have huge signs, and they were dramatic, they were artsy, they were beautiful, but we've squeezed the guidelines to make everything small. And I'd like to talk about or set a meeting where we discuss changing those guidelines.
Mhm. Did you want to
Yeah,
say
Lynn,
something,
I
John?
think, so I too, just looking at the sign ordinance, over the time that I've been here, there are some revisions that need to be done, especially like for this last item, the corner buildings only allowed 2 wall signs or a maximum of 2, either wall, window, or other monument signs. Kind of seems troublesome for those corner businesses because they have to come to the board to, if they're regular signage that is under the that we can approve at a staff level, but it's more signage because they have 2 facing building frontages. They require to go for a sign exception. I think, for corner buildings, we should, discuss that a little bit further. And, maybe that includes increasing overall signage for what we're allowed to approve at a staff level. I mean, our code limits it to 25 square feet, which is not too big, but I think that's a discussion that we can definitely have on a future meeting. And, with the objective design standard stuff that I mentioned earlier coming up, signage is part of that packet. So we can look at updating that along with our ordinance to maybe increase signage overall to, like you said, bring back that kind of historic, larger signage nature so people can find buildings and, they're not using a magnifying glass driving down the road trying to find something. So
Well, so
I'm definitely with you on, if there are things that we need to update and change, I'd be willing, to work with you on updating that section of the code. So,
Lynn, I really had to laugh with what you said because I
you need
agree.
to talk into
Oh,
your
I'm sorry.
microphone.
Early in my career, everywhere I was working all over the Bay Area at the time when I was young, the firms I worked for had tons of clients everywhere. So it was a blessing for me. But the thing that I laughed about and got frustrated about and we talked about all the time was how all the cities and towns and villages were trying to become the same, and with their planning guidelines and their signage and their landscaping and visibility and this and that and the other. Everything was becoming the same, and so the towns lost their character, and I just became frustrated. I figured there's nothing I could do about it, but this might be an opportunity to get back at them. Get back at them. I love
The conspiracy.
I love the word you use, robust. Some of the signs could be more robust, and I think that's probably why people enjoy going to Las Vegas so much. It's just crazy, But that's over the top. But if we could look at that would be wonderful, because I think even in this town, it's somehow it evolved into becoming kind of bland, it's some areas all look the same, and it's since you bring it up, it would be fun to look at that. It would really would be fun to look at that, and it'd be great to see a hardware store that has a big outrageous sign of a Sawzall or something, going on. Yeah, maybe I'm just throwing this. We're just talking.
I like that idea.
So John, to the design standards, that's very particular to certain projects, right? So there's a whole host of signs that are going to change in town that have nothing to do with that, right? So I think my question is how do we facilitate that discussion? I guess it could just be an agenda item and we give 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. People come prepared with their thoughts and analysis on what signs we have and what signs we'd like to see, or, just have some sort of broad-based discussion, or it's a subcommittee, right? I could form the sign ordinance subcommittee at some point, do something like that.
yeah, that could be something. I think, maybe starting off having it as an agenda item where, if either Marshall or Lynn, you guys have some ideas as far as documents go that we can have before the meeting, so that way it's divvied out to the other board members so they have an idea, what everybody's looking for, or just in general what all the board members think about the sign ordinance and how it could be either changed or modified to fit the character of Sebastopol a little bit more than what how it's currently being felt right now. I get a feeling that some of the board members feel it's, the signs are generic across the board all around town. There's no kind of diversity as far as signage stuff goes. So,
I think to that
New
point,
signage.
I think to that point, if you did a catalog of signs in town, I think you'd find a lot of diversity, and it would be worth doing that, right?
Yeah.
So we're not just speaking kind of generally, but actually let's take pictures or whatever of a bunch of the signs and present that to everybody. We all see that, and because we all pass by them all the time, but to see a document that has 20 signs or 50 signs
Yeah.
in certain parts, different parts of town, et cetera, would be so helpful, I think.
yeah. And that could be, from the last year when we did the walking tours of, past projects,
Mhm.
it may be a little bit difficult to do a sign walking tour around town, but if we have a document that, board members gather different signage around town as far as what works, what doesn't work, what's a kind of good idea if it was expanded on a little bit further, or, what is completely out of character. That could be, we could hold a meeting for that and
Yeah.
have that as a special item or
What-
agendized item so that we can have a full discussion.
Yeah.
And then if that turns into, recommending staff to look at the signed ordinance
Mm.
as modifications in the future.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'll volunteer to put together that information if I get someone to help me.
That would be great. I was going to say one other note. I'm on the public art committee, and when we've looked, we're picking out sites for a commission piece, and there's one in particular, Spooner Park, where the solar panels are at the south end of town, and one of our committee members was just complaining about the sort of city signage, call it there's the churches in town, or the welcome to Sebastopol, or the nuclear free zone, or like all of those are also kind of, falling
Yes.
apart and
Yes.
not very inspiring. And so this is Jeff Stucker, who's on our board. He wants to be part of this too, at least from that perspective. But I think he feels it even in the signage in general.
Yes.
Sign clutter he was talking about, right? A lot of little signs that aren't effective, take up a lot of space. There's that, right? So it could be if a subcommittee forms, he could even be part of that. Would be nice.
And who is that?
His name's Jeff Stucker. He's a former school teacher who's on our public art committee.
Mm-hmm.
So just like we were looking at that site, and it's just like, well, we can't move that sign, we can't move that sign. So where's the sculpture going to go? Somewhere else, and even if that could be a great place for it, right? So it just brought up some of that too.
I've long thought Sebastopol signage for introducing the town was greatly lacking.
Exactly. Yes. Okay, great.
yeah.
Well,
So
that's,
I think that could be a future agenda item if, you guys are willing to just supply me with that, and then I can pass it along to the board members so that, we can put it on an agenda, and then everybody has the material to review and, can make additional comments or
Yeah.
ask questions and such.
it'd be nice if it could, like if it was a meeting like today, right, where we have little business, and then we can actually spend some time
Yeah.
really talking it over, and that'd be nice. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Sounds
Do
good.
Excellent.
Do we, if we want to start putting information together, do we work as a formal subcommittee or just get together?
Well, if it's two people, you can get together informally. If it's more than two, it has to be a noticed meeting, and it's not. It would have to be we'd have to formalize a subcommittee happening.
Correct.
Which what you would do or Carrie would do. We can't just sort of say it's now a subcommittee.
Correct. Yeah, I believe, I'm not sure on the subcommittee creation, if it's just acted upon by the board or if it's a city council
Right.
recommend or with a recommendation, that the design review board wants to create a signage subcommittee that then is recommended from the board to city council, which city council would have to approve. I don't know what the specifics are for subcommittee creation because I haven't had to deal with one. But I would say in the meantime, if it's less than a quorum of members, so like Laura said, 2 or less, then you can meet and go over that stuff,
Yeah.
that signage stuff, and then send any of that information to me, and then I can send it out to the group.
Yeah.
So-
And with the person on the art committee who's really interested, I'd like, more input is good.
Yeah. So I guess if it's if he's from a different committee joining a different board, then 3 people could probably meet, right? It's not 3 people from one board meeting.
I'll check with Carrie on that.
That's the Brown Act
Yeah.
gray area.
Because I know, like
We
the
could-
Climate Action Committee has members from Planning Commission, City Council, and then they have their working group
right.
subcommittees.
Working
So
groups, right?
it's a little different in that regard. So
I can just pass Jeff's name to you, and
Yeah.
maybe just sort of more informally, you 3 can talk in pairs, so to speak, and just keep it simple to start with, and then we try
Yeah.
to go from there.
In yesteryear, the design review board had a lot of subcommittees at the Sebastopol Saloon. Meetings,
those subcommittees.
and
How dare they?
where we,
Where you conducted unofficial business.
but, and it was good though, because we talked out issues and in an informal way where you could bring up a lot of different things and talk about them is that really helped make each board member, I think, a better member because of that.
Mhm.
And it made for better cooperation in board meetings, in the formal meetings.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Sounds
can-
like a great idea.
I second that.
It wasn't a motion.
I would immediately volunteer to be pretty active on the sign thing, but I'm real busy for a couple of months with my work, but I can help a little. Maybe
Well,
I could help.
we know as these things go, it takes a little while. So we can just
I
plant
could
the
help a
seed.
little at the what do you call it, the Sebastopol Saloon, or
I'm not familiar with that place.
I'm not either.
It's Lynn's backyard, I guess.
I guess it's Main Street
The
Saloon.
old main.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is good discussion. We can keep it moving. And anything else before we adjourn?
Mhm.
Good.
No.
All right.
do you have
Thanks,
any
everyone.
subcommittee updates?
Subcommittee updates? Oh, that's on. Oh, yeah, we do have that. The subcommittee of the design guidelines, we've gone through all our objective design standards in one round or a couple rounds, but and now we're moving on to the SB9 standards, which is a different state law about related to housing. So we're meeting this week to look at those.
What, pardon me? The last statement?
We're meeting this week for
Oh.
the committee is meeting on Thursday to look at this next round of standards for SB9, which is the bill that allows one single family parcel in certain zones to be subdivided and have duplexes on each of the half parcels. So a site that has 1 unit now could potentially have 4. So this is a state law trying to densify, cities in certain parts of town, basically. So that's what we're looking at this week.
Also known as the urban lot split.
The urban, okay,
Yeah.
the urban lots.
So that's another term that they're using for it. So yeah, so that's the new SB9 law that does allow basically a minimum of an 800 square foot structure building.
You said
if-
minimum?
yeah.
Minimum.
Yeah. So you guys will be getting, that's the second part of the other part of the design standards is the SB9, which will come to the design review board in the future. So the first one next month, we will have our special meeting for the admin draft of the design, the objective design standards. So that's why we moved that meeting to be earlier in the afternoon, because it's a large document and there's a lot to go over. So we'll go over that, and then a few months after that, the SB9 one will come to the board. So they'll both be going to the Design Review Board, Planning Commission, and then City Council for adoption.
Is there an overall timeline goal to, like, by the end of the year? Or
By the end of the year, yes, there's that project is being funded by, I believe, SB2 grants, and they need to be adopted by the end of 23, early 24, I believe is what Carrie had said. So,
okay, great.
there is there is a deadline for those to be in place. So,
Okay.
And it's a little bit more intense with the SB9 because it affects the subdivision section of the municipal code, because it's splitting lots and parcels.
Right. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Meeting's adjourned.
Recording stopped.